Okay.
Let's do it.
Welcome to Craft Cannabis TV. We are really excited to be speaking to Dr. Carmen James, a doctor based in Durban who has been a doctor for how many years now?
11, 12? I think this is 12th year.
That's a long time. So thank you for joining us. It's a real honor to have you. Let's just talk a bit about who you are and your background and what you do.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. This is an awesome opportunity. And yeah, so basically I was born and raised in Durban, and I had no idea when I was growing up what I wanted to do with my life. I had absolutely no idea. I thought I'd actually do something like creative, like maybe interior design or something like that. And so my mom's a teacher, and she would take me to like all her school's career days, and then I would go to all my school career days as well, and just never really knew what it was going to be until one day like these medical students came to speak to us at high school. And they basically said, they were the medical students in first year, and they basically said, I remember one of them very clearly said, medicine is just glorified biology. And when she said that, I was like, what? Oh my gosh, biology is my favorite subject. Like, I absolutely love biology. This is amazing. So, and then of course, like everybody knows, doctors mostly become doctors because they want to help people. And so I was like, I'm going to help people and I'm going to study biology for the rest of my life. This is going to be awesome. And so I apply, go to medical school, qualify. And then basically since then have jumped around from, job to job, really struggling to find myself in the profession. And was basically led down a path where I started to question a lot of the stuff that we were doing in medicine, namely in chronic disease, just prescribing medication, like at the rates that we were prescribing it and still are prescribing it to this day. And I began to question, like, if certain like lifestyle modifications can reverse so much disease, and if people can be educated on how to live a healthy lifestyle, then why are we not focusing more on that and preventative medicine?
Sure.
So that's really how I discovered health coaching and integrative medicine, which is basically a holistic approach to health and healing that focuses like very heavily and intensely on lifestyle modification. And so that's what I do now. I teach people about how to live a healthy lifestyle. That path kind of led me to learning more about cannabis as medicine as well, which we'll obviously get into a little bit later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I spend a lot of time educating people around health and wellness. And I also work as well at the government clinics. Of course, now we know we're in the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm working at the clinics most days of the week, and then, creating educational content for people, just teaching how to live a healthy lifestyle.
And I don't want to go too much into detail about it, but you are a COVID, I wanted to use the word survivor, but I think that's a bit melodramatic because, not most people are, surviving from it, no problem. But you had COVID, so you've been right at the front lines, experienced everything that's going on at the moment. So just tell us quickly how that was.
Yeah, so I also don't like the term survivor because I think that, we tend to use a lot of like war terminology in medicine. If you think of the fight against this or like the battle against that. And I think it creates like a very negative outlook. But if you look at it really, we are pretty much in war times if you think about it, right? We're basically fighting this unseen enemy. And I mean, like, we're in pandemic times. This is an unprecedented time. So a lot of people are calling me a COVID-19 survivor. Traditionally, I wouldn't have liked, that word to be used. But I mean, I suppose it may be appropriate in this instance. So yes, it was a very interesting experience for me, being a healer and then actually being a patient at the same time, and coming face to face with this virus that I had been researching and studying about. And I just became consumed with this thing in the beginning and was doing like a whole lot of research, and then boom, got into a situation where unfortunately I was exposed, became positive. And fortunately, I had a very mild course. And didn't really have many of the symptoms that other people have. My symptoms were basically just sore throat, severe body pain, fatigue. And I didn't have like the cough. I didn't even have a high fever. And so the question afterwards became, well, how did you get over it so quickly? And how did you get over it with such like little impact? And I think that's where the wellness conversation has opened up, because I had been working really hard, even before I became infected, just trying to ensure that I was as healthy as possible, you know, even before this whole COVID-19 outbreak. So
yeah,
yeah,
it's really interesting that at the moment doesn't seem to be a lot of focus on, you know, diet, on exercise, and just general well-being, because as a population, you know, globally, we're not the healthiest, you know. So something comes along like this, and those who are not healthy are most affected by it. But I'd like to get more into how you got into cannabis. I mean, you are what I would consider a progressive doctor. You know, you do media stuff, you lecture, you've got your own YouTube channel, which is very unusual because the general perception of doctors, and no offense to doctors, but is a bit more stuffy and a bit less creative and a bit old school in their thinking. And I mean, when we first started out in the cannabis journey over a year ago, we struggled to get any doctors to speak to us because they were so afraid of towing this line or stepping on the wrong toes or putting themselves out there. And so if you look at the international industry, you know, especially in the States, which is really progressive, there are like loads of doctors who are cannabis friendly and have really sort of adopted and taken this on. But it's so hard to find South African doctors that have progressed into the space. So and we are very into cannabis and wellness. You know, cannabis still has this stigma that it's about guys sitting on the couch, smoking bongs, getting stoned, it's not good for you, etc., etc. And we're still battling through that stigma and trying to decriminalize it in the minds of South Africans. But tell me, what were the first triggers? How did you know, did you sit at home and smoke a joint one day and think, oh, this is quite cool, or did you read something, or what was your entry point into the cannabis sort of interest space?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, and I think perhaps that's the reason why I told that story about, you know, about like actually studying medicine and becoming a doctor, is because of the fact that you know, you mentioned like I have a YouTube channel and that kind of thing, and I don't really kind of tick the boxes with regards to what a traditional doctor looks like or behaves like, right? And that's because I think it all started with me not seeing myself as somebody who is going to become this doctor and, you know, all stiff and starchy. It's not who I am. It's not my personality. And I think that, you know, right from the beginning when I entered into medical school, I just kind of felt like, oh no, I'm in the wrong place. Like I actually don't belong here. And that's why the trajectory of my career has always been like me trying to stuff into this box and not really, you know, fitting there because of the way I think or because of the way I, you know, have you know, approached life in general. And so being open-minded as a person and then bringing that into like with the medical knowledge that I have acquired going through medical school and practicing medicine, I just couldn't push myself into this, like, and into keeping quiet about something and just kind of feeling like I don't belong here. Like there has to be something else. And I think that's really what pushed me to explore alternative medical practices and healing in general. And it was a colleague of mine who had done medicine, and then he also did Chinese medicine. And as you know, there's a very strong connection between cannabis and Chinese medicine. And he had studied, Chinese medicine as well. And he was the first one to kind of, you know, introduce me to this idea that cannabis is actually medicine. And of course, like, I suppose anybody who has been brainwashed into believing that cannabis is bad and that kind of thing, initially I was just like, nah, this is not for me. No, thank you. This is bizarre. Like, I can't actually, what you're saying and how I was trained. And also, this idea of, substance abuse. I mean, I come from, I'm very closely connected with the community where we struggle with drug abuse. And, this has also affected my life personally with my family. And so it was not something that I was open to right from the beginning. But because I love to research and because I love biology, I started researching about the endocannabinoid system and about cannabis and about the history of cannabis. And then that's when I kind of was like, whoa, this is intense. Like, this is really, there's something here. And just kind of started connecting with some of those doctors you mentioned, like the Knox docs, for example, on social media, watching their content, understanding and exploring this for myself. And the curiosity just kept building, and it became too much for me to ignore. And that's really how I kind of got into this space. And I'm still, like, I would say, I'm still learning, like, a lot. Like, I still have a ton to learn, because of the fact that we were not taught that cannabis is medicine. We were taught that cannabis is, a drug of abuse, and it's bad, and all of that stuff. So I think in this process, there's been a lot of unlearning of what has traditionally been taught, and then finding and discovering certain truths for myself. So it's a continuously evolving journey for me. But I think that because I generally tend to be more open-minded, it's allowed me the freedom to kind of explore the space more freely than perhaps some other people would.
What do you think? I mean, how do you think we sort of revolutionize this in the minds of the medical industry? Because, from a cannabis industry perspective, there's a huge amount of interest and things are really starting to move fast. But the medical industry is still very slow. The pharmaceutical companies, the pharmacies associations, it's still something that it's in the background, but they haven't really embraced it. And if you look at how far things have come in the last 5 years internationally, we just seem to be very slow. What do you think some of those barriers are, and how do we break through those?
We need to teach cannabis medicine at medical school. I think that's the solution to the problem. Because coming from like allopathic medicine, it was almost, how can I say this? Like, we looked down upon anything that was not allopathic medicine. I remember being on a ward round where a consultant was grilling an intern for the dose of an antibiotic that he had written up for a patient. It was a really low dose of antibiotic. And we were on this ward round. And this is also, I think, the other issue is that, we approach medicine from this very, like, we know everything, and, we have all the answers, and, and so we were on this ward round, and the consultant was kind of reviewing the medication chart and said to this intern, "You're prescribing homeopathic doses of this antibiotic." Very condescending, very like, anything other than allopathic medicine is rubbish and has no science behind it. And also that the pharmaceutical model is the be-all and end-all. And it's no fault of the doctors who are coming through medical school. I think there is the awareness is being elevated moment, with more and more people asking questions. And fortunately we have the internet now that information is freely available, so people have access to the stuff now. But I think still Western medicine still takes this very, very, like, science, cut and dry, show us the science, when cannabis is probably the most studied substance as far as scientific literature is concerned. I mean, over 20,000 studies done on one plant, right? The science is there. It's just that it's not being taught at medical school. And I think because doctors are not going to just change their minds overnight because of the way medicine is taught at medical school. But if it's integrated into the teaching, and if it's explored more from a scientific level, right from the medical school level, I think slowly then the mindsets of doctors are actually going to change. So
that's obviously a big challenge, because you're technically having to break through the institutionalization of all of these very, very historical, rigid methodologies and systems. And then, so you've got the education space, and then you've also got the pharmaceutical space, who, for obvious reasons, have a very tight grip on what they want to do. Although, thankfully, I think, a lot of pharmaceutical companies are exploring the space and are very seriously looking at it, because the evidence is there. I mean, this is the first drug, to my knowledge, in the history of mankind that has been driven by the general public, as opposed to the medical industry pushing it out. The general public have gone, it's working, we want it whether you like it or not, which is fascinating. And through social media and through the power of media in terms of the general consumer is actually driving this, and not the medical fraternity, which I think is very, very interesting. Let's just talk quickly about cannabis and wellness. So for those people who are listening and watching this, cannabis and wellness, a lot of people do not put those two things into the same basket at all. Give us your insight into why cannabis is good for wellness.
Right, because of the role that it plays with regards to balancing and toning the endocannabinoid system. And I think in order for us to understand why cannabis has a role and how, it can be used therapeutically, but also to promote, general health, we have to understand that the endocannabinoid system exists and what it's doing. Because we were not taught about the endocannabinoid system at medical school, which is, crazy considering it's the most, the largest essentially system that exists in the human body, right?
Yeah.
It was just omitted. And that's not because, okay, so I think also because the discovery of the endocannabinoid system happened very late. But I also think, of course, as we know, because of the stigma surrounding this plant and that kind of thing, it's obviously, still a long way before it starts to become general open knowledge. But understanding that that we all have an endocannabinoid system inside our bodies, and that it is working to balance the body. I think that's the fundamental knowledge that people should begin to understand. So
what we certainly need in these modern times more than ever before is balance.
Correct. So homeostasis is the word that we use to maintain balance. In other words, like if your blood pressure is too high, you're going to have a problem. If it's too low, you're going to have a problem. We want to kind of be functioning. You want your blood pressure to be at an optimal level, right? So the endocannabinoid system is working hard to bring balance in all the systems in your body. Whether it's the immune system, the reproductive system, the respiratory system, it doesn't matter. The endocannabinoid system is intricately and intimately involved in maintaining balance across all those systems. And because we live in a world that is perpetually trying to knock us out of balance, if you think of the food that we're eating, for example, if you think of the environment that we live in, the toxins in the air, in our water, etc., if you think of the amount of physical stress that we put under, whether it's work-related stress or financial stress. I mean, look at this pandemic, right? It's kind of pushed people's stress levels way through the roof. How your immune system functions, balancing between overactivity and underactivity. The endocannabinoid system, I like to think of it like this godmother system that's kind of overseeing everything in the body and keeping everything in balance. And we produce our own endocannabinoids, right? So we know that inside our bodies, the most commonly spoken about ones are anandamide and 2-AG, but we produce these products, or these chemicals rather, these endocannabinoids within our bodies to help to tone the endocannabinoid system. But these cannabinoids are also found in the cannabis plant. And in a world where we are just, faced with so much toxicity, in many instances, it becomes necessary not only for us to be taking cannabis to try and, bring balance and wellness, but also to do the other things that are important to be able to maintain balance within the endocannabinoid system. Things like eating a healthy diet, and that's low in refined sugars, etc. Exercising, managing our stress, getting good sleep. All these things in addition to, and I think it's important to understand that cannabis adds as kind of like a supplement into other things that you can do to try and maintain a healthy lifestyle.
I think that's really important. I think there are some people who look to cannabis and go, well, this is going to solve all my problems. It's like diet products. At the end of the day, if you're still eating badly, you're not exercising, you're smoking, you're drinking too much, and you're taking cannabis, whether that's at some THC or CBD level, it's not going to fix you. But if you add that as a complementary mechanic to food, good sleep, all the things you mentioned, then, the body can become super strong and fit and healthy, And so I think that can really take you onto another level in terms of balance. And then obviously there's the medicinal side, where with treating ailments, etc., which research is just, there's ample research out there that proves that that's the case, and it's just growing as time and as people open up to cannabis as a medicine. Last question. I could probably talk to you all day, but last question. What for any doctors or people in the medical industry at the moment that are on the fence or borderline? Am I into this? Am I not? what advice would you give them in terms of embracing, or at least upskilling or opening their minds up to this? What advice? You obviously went through that barrier. What advice would you give to somebody out there who's watching this?
Okay, so I think it's important to have a beginner's mind, which is opposite to what we taught in medical school, which is that we know everything. But having a beginner's mind is a mind that's kind of a blank slate, that's open to possibilities, and that is willing and able to learn and perhaps understand things from a different perspective. I think that's first and foremost, is being more open-minded. The second thing that I would say is do your research. As I said, if you're somebody who is into anecdotal evidence, there are hundreds of thousands of patient reports about and case studies about how people have, quote unquote, healed from a number of different ailments. But if you're somebody who really relies on science, go to PubMed and enter a search for cannabis as medicine and read through the articles that are there for you to go through and understand. And there's plenty of resources nowadays as well. There's courses that you can take to kind of expand your knowledge and to learn more about this. Because whether you agree with cannabis or not, and people often say, I don't believe in you using cannabis as medicine. Cannabis is not a religion. Maybe some people will disagree, but it's not a religion, right? It's facts, okay? It's not something that you believe in. It's something that you either understand or you don't understand, or you choose to understand or not. And my feeling is that regardless of whether doctors want to be open to this idea of using cannabis as medicine, your patients are going to be using cannabis as medicine.
Yeah.
And if you are not in a position where you are able to advise, educate, empower your patients to be able to make correct decisions around the use of cannabis, then best believe they are going to be doing it anyway. And you may find yourself in a situation where, say, for example, a particular cannabis product is actually harmful for a patient and you can't understand, why is this person deteriorating? You need to be able to have an open conversation with your patients that enables them to discuss this with you. In other instances, you may be like many doctors who are trying dozens of different medications on your patients and seeing no results. And you may be missing the opportunity for offering cannabis as medicine to these patients. And so I think that the thinking needs to be that, we don't have all the answers as medicine. We just don't. That's the truth. And whether we choose to come to the party or not, our patients are going to be using cannabis as medicine. And if you vehemently are against understanding cannabis as medicine, at least find people, communities that you can refer your patients to where they can get credible knowledge, because it's so important for patients to know and understand how they can be using cannabis as medicine. The how is so important. Dosages, which preparation of cannabis they should be using. So many different things to consider, because we're all unique individuals, and because this is a plant that we're using and not a prescription pill, there's so many different dynamic things that need to be taken into consideration when using cannabis as medicine. And if you are not educated and empowered, my advice is please start looking into this.
Yeah, I agree. It's all well put. It's all about opening your mind, and at the end of the day, the consumer is going to drive this, as the consumer already is. So if the medical fraternity have to wake up and have to accept that this is something that is not going away. So listen, thank you so much for talking to us. Some fascinating insights. And as I said, we could probably speak all day, but I'm sure we'll chat again. So thank you for joining us on Craft Cannabis TV, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.